The wind rolled down the valley like a ghost looking for a name, dry and restless, stirring the brittle grass and rattling the hinges on the old barn's doors. Samuel Finch stood with one hand on the gate, staring out across the emptiness of his land. The sun had dipped below the horizon, bleeding orange into purple above the cliffs, and the familiar hush of evening settled over his small homestead. The day had been long, the kind that ate deep in the joints and made a man think too much. He muttered to himself as he latched the gate and turned toward the barn, leading his old mule behind him. The barn smelled of dust and horses and hay, like it always had. Samuel's boots crunched on the straw-covered floor as he guided the mule into its stall. He moved slow, his right knee stiff from an old wound and his left hand arthritic from winters, too stubborn to die. He unbuckled the saddle and let it fall onto the rail, then reached for the bucket of oats. That's when he heard it. A rustle, not the kind made by mice or wind, but human, soft and sudden, like breath being held too long. He froze. The hair on the back of his neck prickled as silence stretched around him. He reached for the pitchfork, hand trembling slightly not from fear, but from the old memory of it. He moved toward the loft ladder, slow and quiet. A wrong step could startle the thing, whatever it was. He climbed without sound, his body remembering the weight of stealth from a life he no longer claimed. The loft opened before him, dim but not dark, the last light from the open slats catching on shapes that shouldn't have been there, blankets bunched together, something trembling beneath them. "Come out," Samuel said, voice calm and flat, like talking to a skittish dog. "Ain't here to harm you, but I don't like trespassers." The blanket shifted. Then, slowly, it peeled back, revealing a face, not a man's, but a woman's. Young, maybe 20 at most. Her skin was the copper brown of river clay, her hair dark and wild, her eyes wide with fright. There was a cut on her cheek, crusted over, and her lips were cracked. She didn't speak. She just looked at him, like a deer waiting to hear the shot. Samuel lowered the pitchfork. "You hungry?" he asked. She blinked. Then, after a moment, gave the smallest of nods. He climbed back down without another word and fetched a canteen and a chunk of cornbread from the kitchen. When he returned, she was still sitting there, half-curled like a child hiding from a storm. He handed her the water first. She drank too fast and coughed, but didn't stop. The cornbread she tore with trembling fingers, chewing like she'd forgotten how. He sat on an overturned barrel nearby, not watching her directly, but not ignoring her either. After some time, she lowered the bread and looked at him. "Name's Tala," she said, her voice barely louder than a whisper. Samuel nodded once. "Samuel." She glanced toward the open slats. They followed me. Might be coming." Samuel didn't ask who. He didn't need to. The bruises, the way her ribs showed through the tears in her dress, the way she sat with her back to the wall and her hands always near her feet. Those details spoke louder than any story she could have told. "Best you stay hidden then," he said. "Ain't many pass through this valley unless they're lost or looking for trouble." She didn't answer. She just pulled the blanket tighter around herself and closed her eyes like she didn't trust the night not to come for her. He left her in the loft and went back into the house, where a single oil lamp gave shape to the shadows on the wall. The place was quiet, too quiet, but he'd grown used to that. He poured himself a cup of coffee gone cold, drank it in silence, and sat in his rocker by the window. Outside, the moon rose slow and pale over the canyon's edge. He listened to the sounds the night made, the creak of wood, the call of distant coyotes, and underneath it all, something heavier, a silence that pressed on the ribs. Sleep didn't come. Not really. He dozed with the rifle across his lap, the way he used to when he rode for the law and knew better than to trust the dark sky. He hadn't held a weapon in years. The metal felt both familiar and foreign, like greeting an old enemy you once called friend. Just before dawn, hoofbeats echoed faint across the canyon rim. He stood slowly, stepped out onto the porch, and peered across the land. Dust trails curled in the distance, too small for cattle, too scattered for a posse. He counted at least 5 riders, maybe more, moving slow but steady, the way men do when they're not in a hurry, because they already know where their quarry's gone. Back in the barn, Tala was awake. She sat cross-legged, watching him from the loft with guarded eyes. "They're here," he said, not loud, just certain. She nodded. Buck Malone. The name struck him like a hammer in a river. He remembered it well. The man had ridden with the Elms Ridge gang years back, before they splintered and scattered like ashes in wind. Buck had been a cutthroat then, young and mean. If he was leading a group now, they'd be worse. "What do they want with you?" he asked. She hesitated, then said, "My father was chief. They raided our camp. Took everything. Killed everyone. I ran. Buck wants to make sure I stay quiet." Samuel didn't ask more. What he needed to know, he'd seen in her eyes. He looked to the barn doors, then to the rifle in his hands. It was old but clean. He'd kept it out of habit, not hope. Now, habit might be what kept him alive. "You any good with a blade?" he asked. She gave a small shrug, then reached into her blanket and produced a stone knife. Its edge was chipped but sharp. He nodded. "You stay up there," he said. "They'll think I'm alone. Let him." He moved outside as the sun bled over the hills, light spilling across the valley like a wound reopening. The riders slowed as they approached, their figures growing clearer. Dust-covered coats, guns at their sides. Buck rode in front, thick-chested, scarred down one cheek like lightning had struck him and left a reminder. Samuel stood in front of the barn, rifle resting across his arms. "Morning," Buck called. Samuel nodded once. "You're on private land." Buck laughed, deep and ugly. "We're just passing through. Heard tell of a girl running this way. You seen anything?" "No girl here," Samuel said evenly. Buck looked past him, eyes narrowing at the barn. "Funny. Your kind don't usually talk to Injuns, much less feed him. Your kind don't usually ask." There was a long moment then, the kind that bends time like a hot wind bends trees. Buck spat, then gestured to his men. They began to spread, circling. Samuel didn't move. "You mind if we take a look around?" Buck said, smiling with too many teeth. Samuel raised the rifle just a little. "I do." The smile faltered. "You gonna die for some red girl, old man?" Samuel's voice came quiet but certain. "Ain't about her. It's about you. Men like you think fear is owed to you. But this land don't owe you a damn thing." Buck's hand inched toward his belt. Samuel didn't flinch. The barn behind him creaked in the wind, and somewhere up in the loft, Tala waited with her knife and her quiet resolve. The valley held its breath. Then Buck's voice turned cold. "Then I reckon we'll take her anyway." Samuel's finger curled against the trigger, and the morning, like so many before it, prepared to bleed. The wind shifted that afternoon, bringing with it the scent of horse sweat and gun oil. Samuel had seen too many ambushes not to recognize the signs. The stillness that felt forced, the crows that suddenly took to the air, and the faint, rhythmic tremor of hooves pressing into hard-packed earth from a distance. He stood just beyond the barn, the sun throwing long shadows across the field. His hand rested near the grip of his revolver, but he didn't reach for it yet. Inside, Tala crouched low beneath a blanket of hay, her breathing steady but her eyes fierce. She had not spoken much since Samuel found her, but something had changed between them, an unspoken current of shared instinct and quiet understanding. She had the look of someone who had lived too long in hiding and was tired of the dark. Samuel stepped into the barn and shut the door behind him. "They're coming," he said simply. Tala didn't flinch. "How many?" "5, maybe 6 to start. Scouting pattern, not the full pack." She rose to her feet, brushing straw from her clothes. "It's him, isn't it?" Samuel nodded. "Buck Malone doesn't leave jobs unfinished." Tala's jaw tightened. "Then let's finish it first." They began moving quickly, efficiently. Samuel checked the boards on the barn's rear wall, prying open a narrow slit that would give them a sight line over the northern hill. Tala inspected the weapons he'd set aside, a rusted shotgun, a spare Colt, and a hunting bow missing 2 arrows. She kept the bow. The steel didn't feel as honest in her hands. The sun dipped low, casting golden fire over the hills. From the lookout, Samuel saw them. 3 riders at first, silhouetted against the ridge, slow and steady, heads turning side to side. Then two more shapes emerged from the scrub brush, approaching from the east. They weren't here to talk. Tala joined him at the crack in the wall. "That's him," she whispered. "The one in the gray coat. That's Malone." Samuel studied the figure. Broad-shouldered, cocky in the saddle, rifle slung across his chest like it had never missed. His face hadn't changed much from the wanted posters. Neither had the dead-eyed swagger. "We wait until they get closer," Samuel said. Tala's eyes were already narrowing. And then we make them regret finding this place." The riders halted halfway down the hill. One dismounted, walked a few paces toward the barn, cupped his hands around his mouth, and shouted, "We know you're in there. You got one chance to hand her over. Don't think we won't light this place up." Silence stretched out in reply. The outlaw grinned, about to shout again, when a sharp whistle cut the air. A single arrow buried itself in the post beside his head. Tala was already knocking another. "I was aiming for the hat," she muttered. Samuel gave her a glance that was half surprise, half respect. "Next time, don't warn him." The outlaws scattered, yanking rifles from their saddles, diving for cover behind rocks and broken wagons near the barn's edge. Gunfire burst out, loud and aimless, shattering the barn's lower boards. Samuel crouched low and returned fire, measured and precise. One round struck a horse's stirrup, causing the animal to buck wildly and throw its rider. "They're trying to flank us," Tala said, shifting positions. "Let them try." But she wasn't waiting. She slid through a loose board at the back of the barn and disappeared into the dry cornstalks, moving like a spirit through the dust. Samuel trusted her enough not to ask where she was going. His focus stayed sharp. Every shot a message. "You picked the wrong place." From the left side, one outlaw rushed forward, thinking he had cover. Samuel waited for him to step just a little too far from the wagon, and fired. The man crumpled with a cry, not dead, but certainly done fighting. More bullets rang out, splinters flying. Samuel ducked behind a beam. His ammunition was low. Then it came, a scream from the trees. "Tala." "No, someone else." Samuel turned to the east window just in time to see two of the outlaws staggering back, one clutching his leg, the other his throat, both struck by arrows. Tala stood between them, bold and furious. Dirt streaked across her face like war paint. She raised her bow once more and loosed another shot. This one caught the last rider in the chest. He fell backward, silent. Samuel charged out the barn's front, firing twice at the remaining outlaw now backing toward his horse. The man dropped his gun, raised his hands. "Please," he stammered. "I didn't sign up for her." "You just did," Samuel said, cold and final. But he didn't shoot. Instead, he let the man drop to his knees and told him, "Ride. Tell whoever's left. The past doesn't hunt alone anymore." The outlaw fled, stumbling to his horse and kicking up dust as he vanished over the ridge. By the time the silence returned, the sun had fallen behind the hills. The field around the barn smoldered with smoke and stillness. Tala walked toward Samuel, her eyes unreadable. She had a scratch across her cheek, but her stance was proud. He looked at her for a long moment. "You good?" "I will be," she said. "And you?" He shrugged. "Not dead. That's something." They both stood in the quiet a while longer. "They'll be back," she said softly. Samuel nodded. "And we'll be ready." The barn loomed behind them, battered but standing. Around it, the land bore fresh scars, but so did they. And neither had plans to run. Not anymore. They left before dawn. The desert hadn't yet warmed, and the ground was hard beneath their boots. Samuel led with purpose, each step confident, a map folded in his coat pocket, though he barely glanced at it. He didn't need to. The land remembered him, just as he remembered it. Every ridge, every dry creek bed, every scrub of mesquite whispered old truths. He'd hunted men through this country before. Now he did it again. Only this time, he wasn't alone. Tala followed a few paces behind, her hands raw from drills, her shoulders sore from the rifle strapped across her back. But her eyes were steady, and her breath was quiet. She didn't complain. Not once. Samuel had tested her the day before. Tracking, shooting, endurance. She passed not because she was strong, but because she refused to be anything else. "Your footing's too tight," Samuel murmured without turning. "If you need to run, you'll trip over yourself." Tala widened her stance, adjusted her stride. "You planning to run?" "Planning not to," he said. They reached the edge of a dry arroyo by mid-morning. Samuel dropped low, signaling for her to do the same. Below, smoke curled up from a campfire hidden among boulders. Two men milled near the flames, Malone's scouts, judging by the lazy way they carried their rifles and the casual drawl of their voices. "Scouting pattern sloppy," Samuel whispered. "They're not expecting company." Tala's pulse quickened. She watched the men through a crack in the rock, measuring them. One tall and wiry, the other thick-necked, with a dragging limp. Both armed, both unaware. "Do we shoot?" she asked. Samuel didn't answer right away. He watched the trail behind them, then the horizon. Finally, he nodded. "You take the one by the horse. On my signal." She took a long breath, steadied the rifle, exhaled slowly. Samuel counted off with 3 fingers. 2, 1. They fired almost in unison. Her shot was clean. The scout dropped without sound, slumping against his saddle. Samuel's target turned just in time to catch the round in the throat. The campfire hissed as blood spilled across the embers. "Quick and quiet," Samuel said, standing. "You're learning." Tala didn't smile. She climbed down and retrieved their weapons, her fingers moving faster now, more certain. She checked the men's saddlebags, found a scrap of parchment with a crude sketch of the valley and a red X marked beside a rock outcrop. "Base camp," she guessed. Samuel nodded. "Malone's too careful to stay with the bulk of the gang, but he won't be far." They buried the bodies shallow and scattered the coals. No tracks, no signs. Samuel took only what they needed: 2 canteens, 1 box of ammunition, and a battered spyglass. Then they vanished back into the brush. By midday, the heat came down like a hammer. They moved slow, sticking to shade when they could find it. Tala's skin burned beneath her collar, but she never slowed. Samuel caught her watching the trail ahead, not just following anymore, but thinking, calculating. They reached the edge of dry mesa by dusk. The land fell away before them, an open plain scarred with wagon ruts, bone-dry and sun-bleached. In the center, tucked into a natural bowl of stone and earth, sat Malone's camp. Tents, horses, the shimmer of lantern light, the laughter of men too confident to worry. Maybe 20 in total, armed alert, but spread out. Tala studied them through the spyglass. "We can't take them head-on." "No, but we don't have to." Samuel pulled a small canvas sack from his pack. Inside, dynamite, scavenged from an old mining shack 2 days back. Enough to send a message. He pointed to the far end of the camp, where wagons were circled around crates. "Supplies. Ammo, food, water. We take that out, they scramble. And in the confusion, we find Malone. And kill him." Samuel looked at her then. Really looked. "You sure you're ready?" She met his gaze. "He'd have burned the barn with me in it. That enough?" It was. They waited until full dark. Moonless, windless. Perfect for ghosts. Samuel moved first, circling wide, setting charges beneath the main supply wagon. Tala took the other side, slipping past a snoring sentry, her footsteps muffled by sand and instinct. When she placed the last charge, she gave a single nod across the camp. Samuel lit the fuse. The explosion tore the silence apart. Fire bloomed high, red against black. Men screamed, stumbled out of tents half-dressed, rifles swinging wild. Horses reared and broke free. In the chaos, Tala and Samuel moved like smoke, unseen, unstoppable. They found Buck Malone near the central fire pit, barking orders, trying to regain control. He hadn't aged well, face lined from sun and liquor, eyes quick with panic. He saw Samuel too late. The old marshal stepped into the firelight like death itself. Gun raised, step slow. Buck's mouth twisted into a sneer. "Should have finished you when I had the chance." "You did finish me," Samuel said. "Just left the wrong part behind." Buck drew fast, but not faster. Samuel's shot shattered the silence again. Buck dropped. Men screamed. A few turned to run. Others hesitated. But then they saw Tala, rifle raised behind the blaze, and their courage melted like wax in a furnace. Samuel didn't chase them. The camp burned behind them as they walked away. Smoke curled into the stars. By morning, the fire would be out, the supplies gone, the gang scattered. No posse needed. The message was enough. Tala said nothing for a long time. Then, "Does it ever feel good?" Samuel shook his head. "It just feels finished." They reached their horses as dawn broke on the horizon. The wind was cooler now, softer. She mounted up, weary but whole. And behind her, the desert held its breath, for the war had ended, but something else had begun. The trail behind them burned away with the wind, scorched clean by justice and flame. But the road ahead was long, and Samuel knew better than to believe peace came quickly in the frontier. There were always witnesses, always ghosts that couldn't stay buried. 3 days passed since the campfire's final ember died. 3 days since Buck Malone lay still beneath a rising sun, his boots never again to strike fear into anyone. They rode east, across flatter lands now, the canyons behind them like scars on the earth. The weight of revenge carried with them, but so did the strange sense that something deeper had begun, something neither of them fully understood. Tala said little on the ride. She kept close, eyes always moving, watching horizons, measuring clouds, sometimes humming an old tribal song under her breath. Samuel never asked its meaning. Some things deserved to be held private, sacred, but now and then her eyes softened, like someone who had started remembering not just what had been taken, but what might still be rebuilt. On the morning of the 4th day, they reached the edge of a small town named Hemlock Ridge. Fewer than 30 buildings, a windmill, a saloon with half a roof, and a jailhouse that looked more decorative than functional. But the townsfolk still clung to its bones, like sagebrush to a dry gully, resilient, sharp-rooted. They dismounted outside the general store. Samuel stepped in first, offering a curt nod to the clerk behind the counter. The man froze mid-reach, eyes narrowing at the stranger's worn duster, the holstered revolver, the sharp line of his jaw. "I heard you were dead," the clerk murmured. "I was," Samuel replied, grabbing a tin of beans. "Then I remembered I had unfinished business." Behind him, Tala entered quietly, her presence silent but unsettling in its own way. The clerk's eyes darted toward her, noting the buckskin, the braids, the rifle across her back. "She with you?" the man asked. "She's with herself," Samuel answered, placing coins on the counter. "That's more than most folks can say." They didn't linger, just took supplies and moved on down the street, toward the sheriff's office. A weathered sign swung loosely above the door. "Justice rides here." But the building looked like it hadn't seen a badge in months. Inside, a man in a faded gray vest sat behind a desk, boots on the table, chewing on tobacco that smelled like dust and disappointment. When he saw Samuel, he sat upright fast. "Marshal Holt? That can't be." "It is," Samuel said. "I'm not here to make trouble." "Then what are you here for?" Samuel tossed a folded piece of paper onto the desk. It was an old warrant, yellowed by time, signed with Buck Malone's name at the top, and 17 other names below it. Outlaws, rustlers, killers. Some crossed off in ink, some not. "Tell your judge this one's done," Samuel said. The sheriff unfolded it, scanned the list, then looked up. "You went after Malone's gang alone." Samuel shook his head once. "Not alone." Tala stepped forward then. For the first time, she spoke to someone besides Samuel. "He took everything from me," she said. "He burned my village, hunted my family. I was left in a cage to die. Samuel cut me free." The sheriff leaned back, chewing slower now. "Well," he said after a moment, "not many in this town would have done the same. Not for someone like you." Tala stared at him. "That's why most of them die afraid." There was no anger in her voice, just a truth she'd learned too early, too hard. They turned to leave. Outside, a boy no older than 9 stood by the hitching post, watching Tala, with eyes wide as a summer moon. He held a toy rifle carved from pine and painted black, the butt of it splintered and worn. "Are you a warrior?" he asked her, voice small. Tala knelt beside him. "Once I was prey. Now I'm something else." The boy nodded solemnly. I want to be that too. She ruffled his hair gently. Then remember this. Don't let anyone else tell you who you are. They rode out by noon. The sun at their backs, the road ahead open, uncertain, and honest. After a while, Tala broke the silence. You could have walked away, she said. Left me in that barn. Let Malone finish what he started. I could have, Samuel replied. Why didn't you? He was quiet a long moment. Then, because once someone found me in the dirt, gave me a second chance, told me I wasn't just the badge I'd buried or the mistakes I'd made. I figured it was time I did the same. Tala looked down at her hands. Do you think there's a place for people like us? Samuel didn't hesitate. There's always a place. You just have to be willing to ride toward it. That night, they made camp beneath a stretch of desert sky scattered with stars. She told him her name again, not just the one he knew, but the one her mother gave her, in a language older than borders. It meant stone that does not break. He didn't try to pronounce it, just nodded in quiet respect. Samuel sat beside the fire, staring into the flames. Folks might never know what we did. They don't have to, she said, but the land will. And in that vast, open silence, surrounded by ghosts and grit and starlight, two strangers, no longer strangers, watched the fire dance and let justice settle into the soil where it belonged.